The Breakdown.
The Noble Art of Self-Destruction by Holding Absence. This is the Cardiff Outfits' upcoming third studio album, arriving the 25th of August via Sharptone Records. The Noble Art of Self-Destruction consists of 10 tracks and, of course, is the much-anticipated follow-up to 2021's The Greatest Mistake of My Life LP, which, as many of you know, is our personal favorite record of 2021. It's the number one. It's AOTY. There's 4 letters for that album, AOTY.
I would put that record in my top 20 all time.
That's fair. Yeah, I think it's up there for me too. Where in that 20, I don't know, but
it's like
right
right below Three Cheers for Sweet Revenge and like right above Tickets to My Downfall. Yeah. Have I made the same joke too many times?
A little bit of like dressing for this review real quick. The Noble Art of Self-Destruction, the final act in a trilogy of records encompassing the first chapter of Holding Absence's career, speaks to, Sam, and I quote, how we are each an unfinished work of art with new meanings and qualities waiting to be discovered. We are each and every one of us a puzzle, a painting, a work of art in the making. Moreover, another quote here, our first album, 2019's Holding Absence, was about love. The Greatest Mistake of My Life was about loss. And this album, The Noble Art of Self-Destruction, is about the person that's left at the end of that, at the end of love, at the end of loss, and the lessons they've learned from their trauma. It's the end of a trilogy. The album art literally says this is part 3 of 3, but it's not the end of Holding Absence. The Noble Art of Self-Destruction ends on a note of hope, of looking forward, free of fear, and of embracing yourself, cracks and all. And I think that's something to be really proud of. End quote. And let's get into it. The Noble Art of Self-Destruction. We've been looking forward to this one all year long. I think once Holding Absence announces a record, you don't only circle that on a calendar, but you just keep circling it until like the page eventually just gets all crumpled up and destroyed.
You mark that you axe each individual day until you get there.
Yeah. And we're here. We're finally here.
We got.
We're not. You guys aren't here. Actually,
we've arrived.
This is early, but we're here.
You know what's a crazy thought is that like it's insane to me we're on the third Holding Absence album because I still think of them as like a little baby band, like one of the newest in the scene. So it's like it just aged me like 1,000 years to hear that like this is their third record. Not to mention that they've done like 2 split 7 inches and had a whole other band before this one started. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like it's been that long? That's insane.
And listen, to be fair, this band's been moving pretty quick. An album every 2 years. So 2019 was that self-titled, 2021, of course, that second record, and now 2023 we have a brand new one. I don't even think it's been a full 2 years. Or no, it has, because that last one was February.
Yeah, it's definitely been a full 2 years. I think the context for this album is critical in really getting the most out of it. So I hope everybody sort of paid attention up at the top there.
Yeah.
I think it ends up becoming an album that you don't only listen to, but you like kind of feel the need to transcribe. So them giving me a window into what their intentions were really helped me best understand this record in a way that I don't know I necessarily would have been able to without it. So I think that I'm really appreciative of the fact that like the context for the specific album was laid out in a way that made it really easy for me to interpret it and get the most out of it.
Yeah, a lot of times when bands are like, their approach is more mysterious upon an album's release, like that's fine too. This record, I think, wouldn't have benefited as much if Holding Absence released it into the world and said, hey, you know, interpret it as you will. I think it's very key, like you said, that you have some context heading into this one to really get the most amount of juice out of that squeeze, right?
Precisely, yeah. So obviously, so let's dumb down that context as much as we possibly can. Essentially, what we're talking about here is becoming like the ideal person that we visualize within ourselves, and how exactly we arrive there. which makes this a very like hopeful record at its core, because ultimately the end goal here is to achieve like the best of oneself, right? And essentially what this record posits is that in order to do that, we need to continuously work on ourselves to get there, and not work on ourselves by just becoming a better person, but also sort of chipping away at the things that make us less than who we'd like to be at the same time, right? Like it's addition by subtraction in that sense.
Yeah.
I think that the biggest thing about this record for me that I think works the most in its favor is how well it fully captures that overall concept. Like it just does a really beautiful job of putting it into words and putting it into feelings and conveying the emotions of going through that process. For me, this is a incredible case of a band laying out exactly what they want to do and nailing it, right? Like they met the end goal and they hit every single like point on the way there. Like it's really an achievement, honestly.
Yeah, and this is for a band where like we're coming from their peak and they're continuing to refine their sound in a way that I can't even, like, heading into a record like this. My biggest question mark with this band was like, can it get better? Can they improve on what they've already done? Like, you know, they did it from the self-titled to that second record, but like, man, that second one is damn near perfect.
Yeah, Holding Absence is a band that I essentially hold almost in a tier all to themselves, right? Where it's like they are competing against their last record, not against anybody else. This
no
band's
other band in the scene
floor is just so significantly high, right? And there's like a dozen bands that I consider to like exist within that space, right? Where it's just like their worst outing is oftentimes significantly better than the best outing from many other bands, right? I think comparing it to the other two records, I think per usual, it's like one of the most elegantly composed and beautifully delivered records that you're going to hear all year. Absolutely no doubt about it. I think that
also important to acknowledge again, like while continuing to like refine their craft. I think that's really important to notate. It's just it's not just this band running it back. Like this time around, the lyrics continue to improve. The riffs continue to get better. Lucas's voice continues to get more and more powerful. It's just like
refinement.
Yeah, watching this band continue to grow is the most impressive piece.
It does feel characteristically different than the last two records, though. It's that base of hopefulness. It does not give me the same feeling that don't get me wrong. Like it wasn't all doom and gloom on the last two records, but it is in my mind the way I sort of think about Holding Absence. And this sort of like shifted that thought a little bit into something different, where now Holding Absence is almost like, it definitely feels like a band that's sort of blossoming on this record in a way that they don't line up one for one. So in that sense, I do sort of understand what they're saying about like a trilogy. So it's not like, this does feel like the third record on a path of growth. It does not feel like it just exists sort of like directly next to those other albums.
Yeah. It feels like, honestly, caterpillar, cocoon, butterfly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so. Let's talk about some of the individual tracks. I think that something that I really enjoyed is how adept this band was at sort of providing a lot of different sort of metaphors and analogies for the overall encompassing idea
like
that they
theme
had
of this record.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. They kind of say the same thing in a lot of different ways. So like it's almost like trying to sort of rewrap and re-gift you the same sort of like idea over and over again, but like in a different sort of like wrapping paper. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at this record from like a beginning, middle, like if that's the point of view, beginning, middle, end, like you watch the band sort of grow from the first song to the last song, as far as like the you compare and contrast the opening track and the closing track. Like it's a very different energy. Opening track is like, you know, my mind is so fucked up, no one should live inside here, like no one should have to live with this. And then the last track is like really accepting who you are as a person.
Right. The
but
last
it's a
track
whole
is
journey
like
to get there. And you're right,
the
like
most
it's
direct
yeah.
about exactly what it's trying to say.
But it is like a whole journey to get there. So you do sort of return to similar imagery or lyricism over the course of that, because it's like you coming to terms with who you are, essentially, which again is the overall like theme of the record.
Right. So like to touch on a little bit of that, Scissors, for example, the line "sever the parts of my soul I've infected with a dull pair of scissors," essentially is talking about, you know, putting in the work for self-improvement, which is something that we continuously explore throughout this record, in that we are saying out loud when we talk about the angel in the marble. Like it is that exact thing,
Yes.
right? I think a track that really stood out to me on this record was Death Nonetheless, which is a song with its existential dread is sort of like still presented under that light of hopefulness. And it's a credit to how well this band sort of juxtaposes like its subject matter against its oddly upbeat and inspiring instrumentals. So in a sense, there's still sort of like this core to Holding Absence that exists. They've just been able to sort of like dress it up much differently than we've seen it in the past.
Yeah, that song in particular it's something that that song made me appreciate the other tracks on this record a lot, because it's the first one that opened my eyes to how much I appreciate what this band ultimately does with a blank canvas. Like we go from opening second of silence on this track to the final seconds of this song, like how much they've layered onto things, the journey you've personally went on from beginning to end on that track. Like just this band, what they can do with like just what this band can accomplish in one song is nuts. And then you ultimately really appreciate that when you go back and listen to every other track on this record. And it's like, man, at the end of the day, this is 4 individuals and a producer. And by the time certain songs are over, it's like core parts of myself have changed. It's like, man, the influence that those individuals can hold, like what they can ultimately accomplish with that blank canvas is nuts. And that is certainly the case for a lot of other bands, but Holding Absence are definitely among like the top tier of those artists.
Yeah, they craft every record to be an emotional journey, no doubt. And they're one of the most like adept at doing so.
And just like a small continuation of that thought, that song again opened my eyes to just how brilliant this band is too at build-ups. Holy crap. And there's a ton of great ones on here. You know, the closing track has a really good one, and I'm sure we'll have a lot to say on that closing track, so I won't spend too much time on that. But like there's 3 or 4 of the best build-ups on any track you've heard all year long on this record only. It's nuts. Right.
The instrumentals in particular like really sell the emotional impact of a song. But it's worth noting that Lucas in particular, it just feels like he was he's like an angel descended from heaven to spread like the good word of emo. Like there's no other. It's like put on this planet for an explicit reason. You know what I mean?
It's all of them though. It's all of them. Scott's riffs carry this record, or not carry. I think they all carry each other in a really great way. Ash's drumming is flawless as always, but like this time around, everything feels so much bigger, so much grander, so that like at times Ash's drumming in particular, it feels like where we're hitting the drums so hard that at certain points it feels like that stick is coming out of the headphones and just whipping you across the face. Like, that's how fucking hard that's hitting. That's how hard those riffs are hitting. That's how powerful we're coming through. The bass on this, it's, again, like, you go from blank canvas to what these songs ultimately end up being, and it, like, puts a fucking tear in my eye. What this band can accomplish.
It really is the epic close to a trilogy in the way that this band has like positioned it to be. I think the album is bursting with like really rich lyrical content that you can kind of like sink your teeth into and chew on, and end up feeling incredibly nourished as you kind of like discover the meaning behind each like individual line and how it like correlates back to like the core concept of this album.
Yeah.
I think that some of the songs touch on like ideas that are sort of like almost like a different interpretation of how to like approach this. Like Honeymoon, like it sort of presents the idea that you don't have to go on this journey alone. Liminal sort of like says, hey, maybe that work is never really done. You're kind of always chipping away. You're always making mistakes, course correcting, forgiving, accepting, improving, so on and so forth. And then, you know, Angel in the Marvel, which you mentioned earlier, just kind of
the closing track,
right, reiterates and like really leans into that core metaphor. And in doing so, it really is kind of the perfect closer to like cement the message that the album is delivering.
Can I say a hot take?
Yeah, sure.
Magnum opus, that track in particular.
Well, that is a hot take.
That's a bit of a hot take, but I think I'm going to stand by it. You talk about like tears in your eyes, like that is, I think, this band's best work. That song in particular, having been a fan of this band since what feels like the beginning, I heard that song and it just fucking instantly clicked in a way that I thought it was, again, their best work. I think it is the crown jewel on this album. Obviously, again, when I say that, it is just incredible. It's one of the best songs of the year. Not to like take all the air out of the room with a hot take. Do you have one?
No, I don't think I have a hot take about this. I just think that like ultimately it really sort of came out and succeeded at what it was doing. And really the only question that sat in the back of my mind the whole time thinking about this album and the review for this was, do I feel if it's better than the greatest mistake of my life, which I truly do think is like a pillar of my like music listening journey within like the alt scene. Like it for me, it is all-timer.
This feels strange to say. I think they're difficult albums to compare.
But if I'm not comparing it to that, then what am I comparing it to?
Like you said at the beginning, like they're in a league of their own. I don't think what's hard is like the conversation then becomes like, okay, is this the best album of the year? But then it's a matter of like, or is this an AOTY like the greatest mistake of my life was? It gets hard because, again, you don't have many bands that can really go head to head with a band like Holding Absence. And also each year is different from the next. Like, so is the competition equal to, less than, or greater than that last record, than the year it dropped?
Ultimately, what I had to do was sort of like sit with it a little while and be like, do I feel the same way about this album that I did the last one? And I think I stopped just short of that. So when I look at this record, it comparing it to what I think is one of the best records that's ever come out in this scene, I don't think that it quite met those expectations, which is kind of where I generally end up with every band who ends up fulfilling that position with it. Like every time a band is following up what I consider to be like an album of the year or one of the best albums I've ever heard, it's always an impossible task to me. It just seems like that it's how will they ever have the same effect on me? And I think Holding Absence once again falls victim to that for me as well. So I think I quietly land at like a 4.5, where I think this is one of the strongest releases of the year because Holding Absence just exists at a sort of like playoff contender-esque level constantly.
Yes.
But when I think back to how I felt after that last album, and maybe even the one before that, I don't know that this quite reached that peak for me, even though it falls within their catalog as being another incredible outing from the band.
I think for me this is a 5, but I'm sort of with you on a few of the points you made, where like I don't ultimately know where I land. Where is this a better record than the last one? But I don't think I'm ready to close the book on whatever my answer is right now. So I don't know what it is. It's a really great album though, and I think that it is a 5. It's easily among one of the best records I've heard this year. And for that alone, I think it's a 5, certainly. But I don't know. I had a wonderful time with this record. I do think it is among the best Holding Absence records, but they have yet to misstep.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know. I love it though. It's a good one. Go check it out.